I have a hearing impairment. I was born prematurely. I was £1.9, which is the weight of a bag of sugar, roughly. And I was born hearing, but the amount of oxygen that they had to sort of pump into me meant that I was, over like the several sort of months I was in hospital, meant that I gradually became deaf. Doctors thought that I was brain damaged because they saw me like leaning to one side and they thought, yep, she's brain damaged, you know, can't do anything about it, you know. My mum was adamant that I wasn't brain damaged, and she was, asking them to order some tests, some hearing tests, to see if that was what it was. Eventually they did it. They had a big table and they had loads of blocks on, and the lady asked me to stack up the blocks, and basically I just went and flicked them off, and yeah, she's just said, yep, I think she's deaf. And from then on, I was diagnosed when I was 4, 3.5, 4. So from then on, I got speech and language. I got really, really good support through my parents.
It is estimated that around 700,000 people may have autism, or more than 1 in 100 in the population.
My name is Jake. Diagnosed in the past with Asperger's syndrome, which is a form of autism, learning difficulty. It has its advantages and it has its disadvantages. The disadvantages are probably socialisation and then acceptance by other people. You're kind of labelled as weird because you think differently and you see situations in a different way to other people.
There are more than 10 million people in the UK with some form of hearing loss. That is 1 in 6 of the population.
I'm Thomas David Lee and I'm 13 years old. I've got a hearing disability. I'm half deaf in my left ear. Well, it's quite annoying because I've got to get it out every day and to sort that out, but it sometimes helps if the teacher's quiet or there's lots of noise in the classroom. But I didn't bring it today because I needed it for one lesson.
Hi, I'm Mrs Wild. I've worked at Henry Beaufort School for a long time, 15 or so years. So I started off doing learning support assistant, always in the hearing impaired department, and recently I did my level 2 signing course, so I now sign in some lessons for some students. For some lessons I sit next to a student, Louise will remember that, making notes of the content of the lesson. All lessons have notes made and then they're kept in a file in the unit.
I can hear people, what they're saying, but sometimes it's a lot harder for me to understand what they're saying because they're covering their mouth like this, or they've got a moustache. Now that makes things difficult for me to lip read them. So shave it off, people, shave it off.
And I don't necessarily look at myself as being disabled, and I'm sure lots of other people don't either.
Just to be treated as normal people.
So just because someone has physical or educational needs, I think they should still have the opportunity to go on to university.
It, in a way, doesn't affect me at all. I live my life the way that anybody should, in the positive attitude that anybody should.
In the UK, around 2.9 million people are affected by diabetes. There is also thought to be around 850,000 with undiagnosed diabetes.
Peter Hearn, I'm 39. I've got type 1 diabetes. Well, I have to inject myself with insulin 4 times a day with meals. And I have to pay attention to my blood sugar levels as much as anything. Make sure they're not going too high or too low, because my body doesn't produce the insulin anymore. I get free medicine.
My condition is hemiplegia, which is a neurological condition which affects one side of the body caused by damage to some part of the brain, either before, during or soon after birth. Doctors believe that my condition was caused by a blood cell getting trapped in one part of my brain when I was in the womb, causing a stroke before birth. It affects all types of different things. The main two things it affects is learning speed, because it is a brain condition, as well as walking. Hospitals don't really have that much treatment for it because the condition's with you for life once you've got it. I've been very, very lucky to have treatment at different hospitals around Britain, that's what it feels like anyway. And I've had Botox treatment, not in my face, unfortunately, but I'm pretty enough already. But I have it in the back of my leg, which weakens the muscles so my foot goes down flat. Physio treatments. Back in October 2013, I interviewed two very important people which are linked to the charity HemiHelp. They help people with hemiplegia, and they've done a lot for me, and I felt it was a good way of using my radio experience. And on Awareness Week, I contacted them and we had a live phone interview with the CEO, John Adams, and we also had an interview with a parent with a daughter with hemiplegia as well.
Isolated,
Yeah.
they feel vulnerable, they think they're the only person around with hemiplegia, and the great thing is to meet other folks and, as you say, to try different activities and, you know, develop your confidence. It's the thing that all children need to do, but it's even more important if you've got an additional thing to cope with, like hemiplegia.
Yeah, so I'm guessing that when people ask you about your daughter, I guess you're very open about it and tell them what it is?
I would do, but I do find, and I'm sure you've experienced this, Colin, I do find that people assume, for example, we have a blue badge to be able to park in a disability bay, and people will stare at me.
Yes.
And they'll be staring at me thinking, what's wrong with you, you shouldn't be parked there. And I'll have people come up to me, adults, and have a go at me for why I am parked in a blue badge, because they have not thought about a child having a disability.
Yeah. When I was younger, people used to always come up to me when I was at school and say, oh, what's that splint on your arm? And I'll be able to explain what it was. But as I got older, people tend to not ask that question or ask why you walk different or ask any questions because they're scared of what you might say. I'm one of the people who's very, very open to how it happens and the problems I have. So I don't like the way people just like stare at me. I find it better if people come and ask me what I've got. I used to have a friend at school who used to make a joke out of it, which I used to love because I don't know people who used to take the mick out of me at all. But people who used it as a way of connecting with me was much easier. So as I walk sometimes or run, my arm raises. And he used to say, how's it hanging? And I used to always say, fine, thanks. Because it's a way of, it was just a laugh. And the fact that when I left school having all my bullies as my friends because I stood up for what I believed in.
And I'll give you an example. We all get colds, okay? But we don't treat that cold in the same way. Yeah, so there has to be other remedies to students with physical or educational difficulties, but we just may need to put some more support in there. That may come with the funding, but actually the aspiration ultimately at the end of the day should be the same.
It is estimated that there are around 375,000 pupils in the UK with dyslexia, and a total of 70 are severely affected.
James Todd, 19, and dyslexia. It affects my life because since I was young I've never been able to spell very well. I've always had difficulties with making sentences, so this has made me have an impact on my GCSE English because I was never diagnosed early enough, so I've had 4 attempts at GCSE English exams and I haven't passed yet.
Martin Luther King Jr. If you can't fly, then run.
If you can't run, then walk.
If you can't walk, then crawl.
But whatever you do,
you have to keep moving forward.